According to the Cambridge English Dictionary, trauma researchers emphasize the resilience of the human psyche. Resilience meaning the ability to be happy, healthy, or successful again after something difficult or bad has happened, or the ability of a substance to return to its usual shape after being bent, stretched, or pressed. Welcome to the Arose from Rubble podcast, where there's no good, bad, right or wrong opinion, and no discussion is off limits. Arose from Rubble is primarily about resilience in the absence of perfection, the knowledge we gain and apply on our journey to self-actualization, physically, mentally, and most importantly, spiritually. Join and explore with me as we journey toward our higher selves. We'll explore spirituality, occult knowledge, practical metaphysics, universal law, self-actualization, relationships, life, and love. And I'm your host, Arose. Greetings, gods and goddesses. Welcome to the Arose from Rubble podcast. I'm your host, Arose. Thank you guys for taking time out to listen. Today's topic is about relationships, and I wanted to discuss relationships as it relates to awakening spiritually or spirituality or on our journeys towards self-actualization because I think it's important. I want to start out, like I said before, with defining the topics because I think it's important to understand the information surrounding the definition that I'll be offering my opinion about. Okay, so relationship, according to etymology, is a sense or state of being related by kindred, affinity, or other alliance, from the root word relation plus ship. I want to address relationships as it relates to awakening spiritually or spirituality because it's such a huge part of our lives. You know, when you think about relationships, that's one thing in life that is constant, whether it's your parental relationship, whether it's your siblings, your family, your friends, work relationships, or of course the infamous romantic relationships or marriage, perhaps. I realized that most of my experiences that I've actually learned from during my spiritual awakening on my journey to self-actualizing came from or via relationships. Relationships with myself, relationships with others are all things that I've had to work through and that have been instruments in my journey. I found along my journey that relational situations were the most painful situations, which contrarily led to my biggest lessons in my spiritual evolution. When we think about relationships, they teach us about ourselves, and other people in our lives usually serve as either mirrors or lessons. So when you're going through something in a relationship, I've personally had to look at that situation and how that other person was mirroring something that I needed to understand about myself, something that I needed to validate, something that I needed to discard, or something that I needed to learn, or they were lessons as a consequence to maybe my behavior in a previous relationship. During our journey, to self-actualization, when we talk about energy and frequency and vibration, then we understand why relationships are so important and how, regardless as to what we experience in a relationship, we can make that into a positive rather than, viewing it as something negative or allowing ourselves to be victimized by the experiences that we have within relationships. My relationships have helped me become more self-aware. I came to understand myself and other people. And I've learned that the more I've learned about myself, the more I understand other people. We perceive other people's based on our perception. It's more about our perception than it is what that person is actually doing. And a lot of times we project based on our experiences. And you need to be able to recognize that in your communication and relationships, because that's how you grow. That's how you take responsibility, and that's where you're able to actually visualize your own personal evolution as you grow. Then the people that you attract are also enhanced, like going, on a more positive note. If you evolving, then your relationships and your friendships are gonna evolve, and your work experiences. It's all about perception and how you view things and how you utilize the information that you're taking in. The realization that most people desire is love and peace. And that's general. Like at the end of the day, we all want those experiences, but we have to be able to look at the experience that we are also offering in ourselves, and how we're showing up. We have a lot of expectations on how we want others to treat us and the experiences that we want to have as it relates to relating to others. But are we given those experiences? Analyzing myself and realizing how I was showing up. When I did subscribe to the concepts of good and bad and right or wrong, taking accountability for how I was showing up is what allowed my compassion to develop. And that's what allowed me to understand what boundaries I needed to have in place in relationships. And that's what taught me patience in relationships. And everything is a balance. I want to touch on priorities and values as it relates to relationships. Often in your spiritual journey, the relationships that you experience are going to lead to you reevaluating yourself and your own personal values. Like, what do you believe about yourself? What do you believe that you deserve? And are you requiring that in relationships as far as how people are reciprocal? Me personally, I can see how I devalued myself looking back when I wasn't aware of who I was, when it was my nature to be a codependent, how I would give more than I was willing to receive. And when I became more self-aware, I had to ask myself, well, even in situations where I could play the victim, or it was likely that a person would play the victim, it's like, okay, but what are you getting? Like, it's always a payoff. You getting something out of that, even if it's the need to be needed. So in dissecting myself and my behaviors, I had to go within and face the aspect of myself that often gave with a motive, even though that was subconscious. I didn't realize that I was giving because I had a desire to be needed, because that's where I found my personal value, rather than understanding who I was as a person and expecting the same value that I was willing to give, because intent is everything. So when you give from a place because you're getting something in return, is that you valuing yourself. And it was a no for me. So that was something that I had to realize. I think conflict in relationships with partners, family, friends, we all have different spiritual paths, and we all have different purposes that our souls signed up to when we came here. And understanding that, it allows you to express your compassion, because everybody is not you. Everybody is not going to understand your plight. And nor do you have to put up with things on the contrary to that's unacceptable, because that other person's plight is not your plight. When you realize who you are and your value, you will be able to draw some lines in the sand and set those boundaries, and understanding you can extend grace to the extent that you are able, but you do have to know what your limits are. And if not, then you're going to experience being devalued, feeling devalued, and not under a disconnection from yourself. because that's what that environment will breed. And don't take for granted that things that we experience via relationships is unnecessary, because regardless as to anything that I say or anything that I've shared that I've experienced that I consider traumatic, all of that was necessary for me to get to this place where I am now, for me to reach the understanding that I am responsible for my happiness. I'm responsible for how I'm showing up, and I'm responsible for the creations in my life. And had I not experienced those situations, I wouldn't be at this state of awareness, and I wouldn't be able to create in my life, because those were my teachers. So don't discount your experiences or let others tell you, we as a collective, we view trauma, especially now in today's society and in social media. We have a lot of coaches, we have a lot of people that these are our mainstream topics these days: trauma and healing and awakening and spirituality, and all of these things that I'm talking about. All of these topics are mainstream, but I hear a lot of victimization in the communications rather than acceptance. And I believe in my heart, I know from my own experience, but I also believe in my heart for others. And I'm saying belief because that puts some space for people to have their own experiences rather than me projecting my response to situations into that. But when I know, and I'm knowing about me, I'm knowing about my situation. So that's something that I know. But I believe for others that they have the same opportunities that I do, because we all here, and that's my purpose in sharing my personal experiences and not hiding behind just my opinion without sharing things that I've actually had to overcome. So like I said, those traumas are catalysts if you choose to view it from that perspective, but that is a choice. I also feel that we need to communicate in our changes in our perspectives and be able to be vulnerable and share those instances, because that's what prevents the alienation during the course of a spiritual awakening, because you feel alone usually. Like if you're in a family, it's usually one kernel popping at a time. So you have instances of isolation, and that's a need, because you are changing your whole perspective about life and about everything that you once thought was truth, more than likely. And because of that, you are going to need that time alone in that cocoon, so to speak, so you can figure out who you are now as a result of a rise in your awareness of self. So you do need that alone time, but at the same time, you don't want to alienate yourself and you don't want to alienate other people. You just want to have boundaries within that, in that realm. I also want to touch on the communication challenges that you might experience. Addressing difficulties. Sometimes it's difficult to relate, or it's difficult to articulate when you've had a spiritual experience, because others may not be able to relate. However, you want to share. Like when if you've experienced a phenomenon, you want other people to experience that too. I assume, well, that's the type of person that I am. Even when I was a teenager, I used to read a lot. And a lot of my peers, especially in the circumstances where we grew up, didn't read. They didn't go to the library. We had a whole library right in the projects, and I would be in there by myself. So a lot of us didn't do that. I didn't judge other people for not doing it. I used to get the information and I used to share it with my friends as much and as often as possible. And I thought that that's what I was supposed to do. And also, you will eventually attract, like I said, when we understand that our frequency changes and we meet new people or older people, or those relationships that no longer serve the person that you are aspiring to be, those relationships will dissipate. And you gotta be able to detach and get some acceptance about that, because you likely won't resonate in the same relationships that you used to. And that's a natural part of spiritual evolution. So being able to have acceptance about that, and being able to have acceptance about the misunderstandings that you're gonna have with the people that you used to be in relation with, because all of that comes up, because it's like a blinder being taken off, more so to you, to yourself, and to your awareness of self and how you used to show up in relationships. I know me personally, I've always been an overgiver. Like, I don't know how to do a little bit. If I extend myself, I always overextended myself. And it made most of my relationships not reciprocal. I always found myself giving and not receiving. And that becomes exhausting. It becomes exhausting because who's feeding you? Who's making you feel valued? And as a giver by nature, I learned that takers never stop taking. That's something that you're going to have to do. You're going to have to learn when to cut it off. And you'll also have to learn when to receive. Like, it wasn't easy for me to take things from other people, even gifts. It would be like, oh, thank you, but you didn't have to. Or, no thank you. Or, just not knowing how to take. But that's because I didn't value that I was an asset. That was a lack of me valuing and validating myself that I did deserve to get something back from said relationships, or even strangers, because the people that you bless may not be the people that end up blessing you. Everybody doesn't have the same capacity to give, but what I've learned is everybody does have something to give, even if that's just being grateful, for the person that you are in that other person's life. I think that communication is important during your spiritual awakening, because you're going to have to explain yourself and explain this newfound sense of self, and give others the opportunity as well to decide if they could be in relationship with you, or if you share information, maybe you guys can grow together along the journey. But that's a choice. And it's also something that you can offer to extend in those relationships that mean a lot to you. But never should you find yourself in a situation where you are not willing to be who you are, or you're not willing to elevate because you don't want to make others uncomfortable. I experienced dumbing myself down to fit in, having mundane conversation. And at the end of the day, that's not who I am. I'm a deep person. I like in-depth conversations, and not that it's always a time for that. It's a time for everything. But for the most part, that's what feeds my soul. That's what feeds my spirit as a person. And I prefer to relate to others on that level, because that's where I'm authentic. That's where I'm most authentic. And I'm comfortable with my authenticity. So I don't want to play around in relationships where it's no depth. Everything is surface level. I don't like that. And especially now, like, at the end of the day, we are evolving in consciousness collectively. So that means that everything around us is going into a process of evolution, and we're supposed to rise with that consciousness. That's what this technology is about in the physical sense, and in the spiritual sense. When we look at ourselves and this concept of matrix, us as beings are evolving, and we have to rise along with those times. The earth is restoring herself. And I'm saying herself, and I'm referring to it in the concept of feminine energy, because the earth is feminine energy. So we have to rise with that consciousness, because the goal and the evolution of consciousness is love, and it's unconditional love, which is the highest of vibrations. So it's no room to dumb yourself down in any relationship for the sake of any relationship. And when I say any relationship, that means every relationship. So that means work, home, school, wherever you are, you need to show up as you, because in a minute you really not gonna have a choice. That's what the apocalypse is bringing. It's a lifting of the veil. So we won't even be able to function within the age of Aquarius with lying, with not being able to be our authentic selves, because we are evolving spiritually. So that's a vibration, and you can't fake a vibration. It either is or it is not. So you won't even be able to dwell amongst high vibrational beings and in a high vibrational atmosphere if it's not authentic. So you may as well do the work yourself, or you get left behind, because that's what this is about. It's about doing the work or getting left behind. And in doing so, that means evolving your relationships as well. Now, people gonna judge us, and they gonna usually judge us by the person that we used to be, especially if they haven't made any personal changes. They're gonna expect for you to show up the way you've always shown up, and in that case, you're gonna have to discuss your personal growth and where you looking to go and where you are now. And if they can't identify with your evolution, it's likely that relationship is gonna fade out. And with everything, that's where your authenticity comes in, that just being true to yourself and trusting that when you get to a place that you understand that you're in the process of a spiritual awakening, everything that you lose will be replaced, and you'll become certain of that to the extent that you will naturally get some acceptance about your evolution. I would say, when understanding yourself, also don't get to a place where you feel special. And I'm not saying not to that. I don't mean that it's being synonymous with value. I just mean that understand that every soul that's here is on the evolution. Now, whether they ascending or descending is up to that individual soul to decide. But either way, it's evolution. That's their journey, though. So, you want to refrain where you able from being self-righteous or thinking that you right because you going through this. It's like my newfound freedom as a result of me discovering myself through my spiritual journey, or have you being able to see through things. And although those are special occurrences, I don't want to make others feel bad for not having that same insight or that same experience. That's not my place. However, I cannot, on the contrary, dumb myself down on my abilities either, because they are unable to see. So at that point, that's where the choices come in with your surroundings, who you surrounding yourself with, and then asking yourself what your true intention is with the information that you sharing, or how you showing up. Don't make yourself to be better than others, because when you feel like you're a teacher at heart, like I do, I understand that I'm a teacher and a student, and that's the balance of it all, because life is about balance. Too much of anything is bad for you. So, in understanding the balance, that's what keeps the ego in check, so to speak. Because people, especially people that consider themselves spiritually evolved, and what people in general that function from a place of the ego or of the lower nature have a tendency to talk at people rather than to people. And that's my point in sharing some of my vulnerabilities. Like, I'm putting those things out there because I want to connect, and I'm not ashamed of the things that I've had to overcome. It is what it is. I'm not hiding from anybody, and if you tell it, then you ain't got to worry about nobody else telling it. Is how I was taught. So that's my point in sharing some of my vulnerabilities. But when you get to that place, you just have to go inside yourself when you coming off the wrong way, and just ask yourself, like, okay, well, what is my intention? Like, really, what is my intention? Because sometimes your ego may take over, especially when you're in a place where you're not able to create yet. When you first learning, and you trying to learn how to control yourself, because that's a part of the process, is developing self-control. That's all in understanding that you're a creator. Because prior to that, the narratives that you were given while you were living is what was controlling your creations, because you didn't realize that it was you, because you lend your power outside of yourself. So it's a process. It's a process, outgrowing dynamics and positions and all of that in your old self. So give yourself grace when you outgrowing these relationships. And don't look at that as a good or a bad or a right or a wrong. It just is what it is. You can, in the relationships that are meaningful to you, you can provide insight, and you can add your tools, and give others the opportunity to understand the same things that you now have an understanding for. Because that's a part of being able to continue to relate, navigating the differences in your beliefs with other people, especially if you came from a religious background and you coming into spirituality. That is deep. Well, it's deep to me, because I've never been super religious anyway, but I couldn't fathom having been religious and then jumping from one extreme to the next when you coming into spirituality. Because you could be spiritual and understand religion, but I'm not sure if you can be religious and understand spirituality. We do have to understand the beliefs of others, and that we signed up for different paths. So I don't judge other people for their beliefs. I just look at it from a perspective from the outside looking in, as that was the journey that they decided to take so they can get where they needed to get in this life. This may not be for them. Having that difference in belief systems can cause friction, but you can find ways to just have a mutual respect for what other people believe, because at the end of the day, we all think that we are right. And you are, because this is your journey, this is your experience, this is your reality. When you come into spiritual awareness, or when you awaken spiritually, you realize that everybody's reality is their reality. So you can't knock somebody else's experience just because they don't believe the things that you believe. This is your personal journey. Like I said previously, the truth resonates in your spirit. What comes from the heart touches the heart. That supersedes belief. If you trust yourself, if you know, and that's where we are. That's where we are moving. That's where the earth is moving spiritually and astrologically. That's where we are moving toward the age of Aquarius. The age of Aquarius is going from the concepts of faith and belief, which leaves room for interpretation, to I know. And I know in my heart, I know in my spirit, and I know vibrationally, because I'm responsible for the experience that I'm experiencing, and it matches my vibration, because that's the only way I can see what I see, is because I have to be on the same frequency, and everything that's showing up in my reality has to be a vibrational match, or I wouldn't even be able to have that experience. So that's what the knowing is about. It's about knowing within yourself and being confident in that. and not needing any outside validation. This is your life. This is your experience, and you create your reality. Now, I want to touch a little bit on romantic relationships. And I'm saying that because that's usually the person that you romantically involved with is the person that you are closest to in every aspect. You know, you especially if you married, if you made that contract, which is what it is. And to be perfectly honest with you guys, as long as I've been with my mate, I'm really questioning whether the concept of marriage, it's not even a question. I know that marriage can be a distraction because we are spiritual beings and we came here to evolve our souls. That's multidimensional. So when we think about the constructs and the concept of marriage, that was created by man. That's not a spiritual creation. We've added spiritual rules to it that we chose to collectively agree upon. But at the end of the day, that's what it is, as simply put as I can. So that's a choice. And I'm not saying by any means that now that I've experienced a spiritual awakening that I don't want to be in relationship or married to my husband. But the requirement is that he values me as much now as I value myself. And ditto, that I value him as much as he is valuing himself. And that we are also on this journey together, that we are evolving spiritually together, that because we are co-creating as a married couple. So that means our aspirations need to be in line, and that can be difficult. I know personally what was a phenomenon kind of to me, honestly, is that when I didn't even realize that I was going through a spiritual awakening, when I started questioning things going on around me, that wasn't something that I told my husband right off the bat. That when I took comparative religions, I was beginning to question, you know, the biblical principles that we did adopt into our lives, or the concept of Christianity that we did take in. Because like I said, I also went through other religions as well, but that wasn't a conversation that we necessarily had. It wasn't until we had some time together and we had some deep conversation that we came to the realization that we were both questioning things. So that was kind of deep for us to both be in the same place, you know, be in the process of awakening at the same time. But at the same time, when you do understand that this is a shift in consciousness, and the goal is for it to have a collective effect, then I can understand how this is just the frequency that's out here. Because now that I have more spiritual people in my life where I'm entertaining more spirituality as a whole, I realized that a lot of people went through the same things around the same time. So that is another example of frequency, and how the frequency is controlling what's in the atmosphere, even on a collective level, because a lot of people had simultaneous spiritual awakenings. From what I'm understanding, I know within my household that that's what happened, and I know within my relationship that that's what happened. But that's also a general consensus in spirituality, based on, you know, what I'm listening to from other people who consider themselves spiritual or in the process of awakening. So when you understand energy, frequency, and vibration, then that helps you understand that the collective consensus is just that, even on the energetic level. It's just like when something comes into your awareness, that's in the ethers. So that means that that frequency is out there for anybody who's vibrating on that frequency to pick up. That's just like, and to put it in layman's terms, I'll give you an example. It's just like you have an idea, and that idea you don't explore but you find out that somebody else came up with the same idea, a person that you don't even know, that may not even be in the same country as you. And that's because that's a frequency. It's time, as it relates to evolution, for whatever that idea is to come to fruition. So that becomes public consciousness. Let me put it that way. So somebody has to do it, and that's why you hear a lot of the same things when you within a community, and it's a general consensus, because that's a part of the process. That goes to show how everything and everybody is connected. So okay, I kind of went off on a tangent. I apologize, but I just wanted to share those examples because that's just the reality of it. But I was talking about romantic relationships and just being open. We have to remember that this is a multi-dimensional experience, and that we are here to heal and evolve our souls, because our souls return. The soul is infinite. So I know that I've lived many lifetimes. I don't have remembrance of those things. However, it is information that just flows through me that I don't have control over. That's my soul speaking. That is God in me, using me to channel information that my soul, that's why it's called remembering, because I'm remembering information that's already within me. It's already inside. My voice is just being used to channel this information. I've read a lot of books along my journey, and a lot of that information, or some of that information, some resonates and some does not. But this change and this transformation that I've experienced in my being, in my physical being, and in my spiritual being, is spiritual. That didn't come from something I necessarily read. That was it's a part of my soul's journey. It's just an inner awareness and an inner knowing. When you connect with higher aspects of yourself, when you connect to the God in you, you don't necessarily have control over that. The goal is to control that. The goal is to get on a frequency with that on a consistent basis, so you can consistently receive those messages, and you can consistently receive that inner guidance. And now in the spiritual community, they call that a download. Like in my previous podcast, that was downloaded in my spirit that something was about to happen to us as a collective within society. And sure enough, that something happened. That was my higher self that was aware of that information. That didn't necessarily come from my consciousness. That came from my subconscious. That came from my soul. That came from my spirit. Those aspects of me that I wasn't as aware of that I am now. So the goal is to live in this place of knowing, to function regularly from the perspective of God that is in me. That's why even the Bible for Christians says greater is He, because they say that God is a man, greater is He that is in me than he that is in the world. Because He that is in me is God. So, anyway, I want to wrap this up, and I just want to say that in closing, that nothing has taught me more about lessons in my life and about awakening spiritually than my relationships. And as a result of all of that as a whole, the one thing that I have learned is how to love unconditionally. Love myself first, and then extend grace and love others that I'm supposed to. Because I now have the understanding, but that just because I have to disconnect from this relationship doesn't mean that I don't love you. It just means that I have to love you from afar. Because your frequency is not in alignment with my frequency. And when my frequency is off, I'm not functioning as my highest and best self. So we can't be in the same magnetic field because we don't have a synergy anymore, a collective energy exchange that allows me to vibrate as my highest and best self. And because I love that feeling, I'm in love with me. I'm in love with the feeling that I give myself from being assured and aware. And that's what's most important to me. Being in love with myself first. And then others. Showing up as a frequency where I inspire others to change, to grow for the positive. My whole goal, as I said, is to be self-aware and to be able to show up as my highest and best self. That means self-actualize. That means functioning from the perspective of my fullest potential. Therefore, I require that energy in order to maintain that and maintain myself within relationships. So the reality of it is that we're going to have to accept that some relationships were seasonal. You know, some people come into your life, like they say, for a reason, a season, and sometimes a lifetime. And sometimes it's time to even end marriages. Because what is that anyway? You know, when you function from a perspective of the soul and the evolution of the soul, what does that really mean? Because you have an acceptance that you needed that. Because it's not about whether the marriage was good and bad and right or wrong. It was about the necessity of that relationship to bring you to a place within yourself, because your soul came here to grow. It's not about the other person and what they did and being a victim. It's not about any of that. It's about you being able to see you and growing in a more high vibrational state as a result of a situation that may not have been high vibrational, and having some acceptance about that. So that's why you question everything, even the concept of marriage. We have to question that, and we can't consider ourselves more evolved beings without having that question. Like you sign up to commingle with another person for life, but when you understand that you are a multi-dimensional being, life never ends. It's just constantly evolving. So who are we to put labels on anything rather than accepting everything, that everything is exactly as it should be? You know, even with our families, we don't choose our family. You know, when you awaken, you'll find a lot of enemies within the people that you call families. And what is enemy? Enemy is inner me. So you will have a lot of people in familial relationships that reflect the inner you. And when you able to communicate on the same frequency as those people, but you want to elevate to another level of awareness and consciousness that's more high vibrational, you're going to have to question those relationships and be able to detach as a result of some of them, if not most of them. So when a relationship is supposed to work out, then you'll have the capacity to extend the grace necessary to maintain that relationship. But if the capacity is not there, nor is the grace, and that's okay. It's okay. Along this journey, you will realize how much of an enemy you are to yourself. So you definitely skip red flags within relationships. You know, when you look back at the relationships that you used to resonate with when you were functioning from your lower nature, all the relationships you skipped past with your rose color, all those red flags with them rose colored glasses on, all of that's gonna come into question. And that's not you anymore. So you have to allow that to dissipate and be okay. It doesn't have to be negative. You know, you can still be cordial with those people, but if they desire you as much as you desire them, then that evolution will take place simultaneously, or it'll take place collectively. You know, you are no longer the person that you used to be, so you're not going to be able to relate to the same dynamics. So unless you evolve together in those relationships, it's likely that they won't be sustainable. So you just have to be okay with that. You know, me personally, in my heart, I realize that everything is connected, and that the reality of this 3D experience is that everyone is not going to be there. Everyone is not going where you're going. So you called to do exactly what I'm doing, and that's to find your tribe. Find those people that are on the same frequency and the same vibration. Actually, you don't have to find them. You just show up as your authentic self, and they'll be attracted to you. And when you understand the energy, the frequency, and the vibration, you'll understand what you're attracting. And those people, places, and things will be your reality. So accept that. So that's it on today's show. I would like to know what your experience is in your spiritual awakening. So you can email me at dia@arosefromrubble.com, and we can create a conversation. In the meantime, I love you guys, and thank you so much for listening. Thanks for listening to the Arose from Rubble podcast. As a disclaimer, I am not a licensed therapist, counselor, psychologist, or psychiatrist. I'm a student of metaphysics and occult knowledge who is bona fide in life, relationship, and self-actualization. If you would like your questions addressed live or in private, or perhaps you or someone you know would like to be a guest on the show, feel free to email me at dia@arosefromrubble.com. That's DEA@arosefromrubble.com. Also, subscribe on YouTube, Rumble, Facebook, and Instagram at Arose from Rubble. And again, thanks for listening.